Hello and welcome to another edition of 310 to Left, presented by your New England Ford dealers and F-Series, America's best-selling truck for 48 years, and the official truck of the Boston Red Sox. Tom, Caron, and Alex Speier. And as we get ready for the World Series, we look back at one of, if not the greatest World Series of all time. Alex Speier, it has been 50 years since Carlton Fisk waved the ball fair and the Red Sox beat the Reds in Game 6 of an unforgettable game in an unforgettable World Series, though we do like to try to forget that they lost the World Series ultimately in Game 7. Game 6 was in many ways a seminal moment for the World Series, really kind of put it back on the map, recaptured the national attention, the consciousness with an incredible World Series. And it's something that even as much as everything has changed in baseball and in Red Sox Nation with 4 World Series, we still look back to that World Series as such a vital moment and such an important milestone along the way for this franchise.
It's pretty incredible, and I was born in 1975, so don't really have a firsthand recollection of that World Series. But this year, I made a point of educating myself a bit more deeply in it, and to understand the magnitude of it as a national sporting event at the time, where it was the most watched baseball game ever in terms of ratings. The buildup that occurred as a result of the 3 rainouts that took it away from any conflict with the NFL and made it the only game in town at a time pre-cable, when there were only a few networks, but when there was enough reach of enough, like, television was ubiquitous, and there were only a few channels running the game. And it was this surpassed the Super Bowl in terms of viewership in many respects. The build-up that occurred over the 3 days of rainouts really made for this kind of incredible number of personally driven storylines, and made it memorable for decades to come, a half century to come, right? Like, you're able to still talk to the principals who were able to recall in such granular detail some of the wonderful twists and turns of a game that was pretty epic in terms of franchises that were long suffering at that point, and hoping to have this kind of remarkable breakthrough, and just loaded with Hall of Fame talent. It is an incredible game that is there's a reason why it continues to be studied and relived half a century later.
Yeah, I'm older than you, and I grew up here, and I remember being able to stay up late and watch the end of that game, like any good parents, allowing their child to go to school on it. And that next day at school, I just remember, a little Holy Cross school in Lewiston, Maine. We learned nothing that next day. All anybody wanted to talk about was that game last night, and talk about Game 7 that coming night, because that game was just such an epic game. So many swings. And again, the Reds were the big red machine. They were the evil empire of the era. The Red Sox, had been a team with some expectations, but not great expectations. And they were a young team. The top 2 rookies in Rookie of the Year voting. Fred Lynn, who'll be joining us in a little bit, finishing with the Rookie of the Year and the MVP award, the first player ever to do that at that point. Jim Rice finishing second in the Rookie of the Year award. Dwight Evans was still young. Carlton Fisk. Carl Yastrzemski on the other end of it. The old man in the sea was sort of in charge of the whole thing. It was just such an incredible team for New England to fall in love with that summer.
Yeah, and this was kind of the continuation of the 1967 magic that happened, right? Because you had Carl Yastrzemski and you had Rico Petrocelli as players who had bridged those 2 different teams, and were iconic. But then you had this new vigor that had formed around it with this young core of players who were kind of like, roughly college age. And that was pretty important in terms of the cultural landscape of this, because, this was a World Series that captured the imaginations of a very young fan base at the time. And it was against the backdrop of really difficult circumstances in Boston, right? This is at the height of the busing crisis. So there's a lot in life that's kind of tearing apart the fabric of the community, and yet you had this team that was able to be this kind of galvanizing force, and this very proud element of regional identity. And there was again this connectivity that was recognized at the time by observers, whether writers or players, as pretty remarkable in terms of this college town that saw kind of, in a way, itself reflected in this very talented roster with Fred Lynn barely out of USC, and Jim Rice, who was 22 at the time, and other players who were just young and just kind of scratching the surface of their potential, and really it felt like a World Series that of potentially competing dynasties, right? Jim Rice has talked with us about the idea that he believes if the Red Sox had won that they were on the cusp of being a dynastic team. And the Big Red Machine that's remembered as one of the greatest of all time a half century later, that won the World Series in 75 and 76. That very easily could have been the Red Sox. And in that moment, in that Game 6 to Game 7 pivot point of this incredible World Series, where all of the games were so tautly competitive or had something incredibly compelling, like Louis Tiant throwing his 163-pitch complete game, you had something that was so special about the personalities and the potential there. It just loomed as something extraordinary.
It happened virtually on the eve of free agency, changing the game. Part of the reason the Red Sox did not become a dynasty, their players left, Fred Lynn included. Peter Gammons wrote that great book about it, Beyond the Sixth Game, and how everything kind of changed after that. Fred Lynn, I want to mention, is going to be part of one of the honorees at this year's The Tradition. Such a great event. You've been a part of it in the past, Alex. I get to host it every year for the Sports Museum at TD Gardens. Coming up November 18th. A great lineup this year, in addition to Fred Lynn, who, by the way, is bringing Jim Rice as his presenter. So getting the two of them to sit there and talk, the Gold Dust twins reunited on stage, is going to be a lot of fun. Vince Wilfork is coming from the New England Patriots. He'll be honored. Tim Thomas from the Boston Bruins. Isaiah Thomas from the Celtics. Gabby Thomas, the track and field superstar and the gold medalist. And Keegan Bradley, just off the Ryder Cup as captain of that. So it's a terrific lineup. And it's funny, we were having a meeting the other day talking about it. Who should be the headliner? I don't know. They don't let me decide these things. But there's a pretty good case that it'll be hard to surpass Fred Lynn and Jim Rice sitting down to talk about the 50th anniversary of that. And of course, Jim Rice, not part of that World Series. And you talk about, had they won that, maybe they become a dynasty. To a man, every member of that Red Sox team believes they would have won that World Series if they would have had Jim Rice in the series, but he was unable to play with the injury.
Yeah, Jim Rice was injured. Fred Lynn had been banged up early in the World Series and only kind of was able to get back into feeling pretty good at the plate, I think, for Game 6, when he ended up hitting a 3-run homer early in that game to kind of kickstart the Red Sox in what was this incredible back and forth game. There are certainly some fascinating what ifs that go along with that game. Some managerial decisions, of course, that go into the question of what ultimately unfolded. But again, the fact that it's that we are able to recall who was available and who was absent in that moment, and decisions by third base coaches and by managers, and Louis Tiant kicking out Daryl Johnson and say, "Get back, go back to the dugout, get away from me," and the manager listening to that. A little bit of Max Scherzer homage to that the other day, right, when he dismissed John Schneider from a mound visit. It was a wonderful and cinematic World Series that has rightly been examined at length. And I do actually there was one great book by Mark Frost called Game 6. And Mark Frost is a fascinating fellow because he's Lucas Giolito's uncle, and he wrote a wonderful book about Game 6 of the World Series that was published in 2009, from which I learned a lot. But really understanding how this magical fall classic was the classic of classics in many respects.
All right, but let's not listen to us. Let's listen to a man who was front and center of the three-run home run in the first inning, as you said, on deck when Fisk ended the game with the home run. Fred Lynn, the MVP and Rookie of the Year that year. He's our guest on this edition of 310 to Left, presented by your New England Ford dealers. 310 to Left is presented by your New England Ford dealers, who've been taking everyone out to the ball game at Fenway Park for decades. Catch Ford next time you're at Fenway, including in the Ford Clubhouse, a full-service bar perfect for bringing your lineup together and for recording our live edition of 310 to Left. It's all brought to you by your New England Ford dealers and F-Series, America's best-selling trucks for 48 years and the official truck of the Boston Red Sox. Fred, I guess happy anniversary. The 50th anniversary of one of the great games in baseball history. Does it feel like it's been half a century since that game 6?
God, it sounds terrible when you say 50 years. I'm like, who are you talking about? Me? Can't be. But you know what?
You were just in that game, yeah.
I still remember it like it was yesterday.
At what point, Fred, did you over the course of that game, obviously it had been the buildup, right? Like the 3 days of rainouts that had occurred in advance of Game 6. And it was funny because you read the coverage at the time, and some of the players were saying, well, this might take away some of the juice from this game. It might feel just like an ordinary game because we've removed ourselves from the rhythm of it. When did it feel like the switch had flipped on and this was a game that was just this kind of incredible crucible it would be lasting?
Well, you know what? I don't think we as Red Sox players thought like that at all because we had to win. Maybe Cincinnati thought that because they didn't have to win. We did. I will say this. Having sitting around at home for 3 days, I think I went to underneath the stands and took BP once or twice, but we couldn't even throw on the field. We couldn't do anything. I don't know what the Reds did. I don't know where they went. Maybe it's a Tufts University or something. But I don't know what they were doing. But I remember, like my dad, he had to go back home because he had to go back to work. And so we lost a lot of our parents, especially people that, played from Southern California. They had to go back home and work. So when the game started, I remember there was a real apprehensive feeling for the fans. They were, they were waiting to burst out and cheer about something. Well, fortunately, those 3 days gave me a little bit of a break because I kind of, to be honest with you, I was kind of running on fumes. That was my first full season of professional ball in one place. And I remember the second half of the season, I was still hitting pretty well for average, but my power stats went down. And that 3 days gave me a little bit of rest. And in the first inning, I came up with 2 guys on and hit one further than I'd hit one since May, over the Red Sox bullpen. And that got the crowd into it. Now we're up 3-0 and we're feeling pretty good. The crowd is energized. Now it's a game. Now, the Red Sox, okay, we're in it. Bam, we could win this thing. And that's where the fans felt too.
Of a moment where it got about as quiet as I've seen a crowded World Series. You slammed into that wall, and there wasn't padding. There was padding the following year. So a lot of center fielders have gotten to thank you for that moment. But you were down, and it was a little bit before you got up. And I've watched it again recently, but I remember in real time, we all thought you hit your head, right? We didn't know what happened because you're following the play as it came back towards third base, and then you look up and you're just down there. Take us through that moment and how tough was it to shake it off and get back in there?
You know what? I looked at the replay too. I don't know when I saw the replay. It wasn't. I think it was after the season at some point. But anyway, I had done that more than once. When I was at the University of Southern California, we played in a lot of ballparks. There was no padding on any fence. There were cinder block walls. And I had done that before. This is, my football mentality coming to the forefront. Back, when I played football, you went across the middle and you were going to get hit by a middle linebacker, whether you caught the ball or not. So my theory was, might as well catch these things because I'm going to take a hit. Well, if you remember right, I think it was game 3 or 4 in Cincinnati, and Ken Griffey hit that same ball at their place late in the game, and I ran it down. Maybe a kind of a snow cone catch to kind of save that game. Well, this is the same ball now. He hits again, but it's in Fenway. So I'm tracking it, and I'm one step short. And I went up and I hit the wall, but I did not hit my head. I hit it with my shoulder and my backside. And what happened, guys, is that I lost all feeling from the waist down. So I really thought I had broken my back. Um, that's why I lay there motionless because I was afraid to move. And everybody came out. I know the trainer came out, and I think Daryl's there, and they were talking to me, and I was fully conscious, but I couldn't feel anything. So I was a little more than scared of what's happened. And then, when you hit your funny bone and it starts to tingle, well, that's the feeling I got. So I could feel it in my waist and my legs, and I started to get that tingly feeling. That's when they helped me up. And I said, I started shaking around and, making sure everything's still attached. And then I said, yeah, okay, I'm good to go. I felt it, the rest of the game a little bit, but I wasn't coming out. That's for sure.
And then, that obviously you jump started the game, right, with that early first inning home run to put the Red Sox up 3-0. But then there's kind of that leak of runs that's occurring over those next few games, right? And what was this is your season on the line. You guys have to win this game. Was there a kind of feeling of foreboding of like it's not going? There was a lot of emotion invested in this World Series too, right? Like everyone knew that Tom Yawkey was sick, that he was like trying that. A lot of the players were very mindful of this idea of like wanting to win a championship while Tom Yawkey was the owner, and of course it had been such a magical season. How would you describe the emotions that started forming as the game is as the score is kind of leaking away from you guys, and while you're not feeling great after running into a wall?
Well, you know what? Having looked at this game and at the World Series after my career was over, I had a lot of time to think about it. At the time, you're in the moment. You're not really thinking about all these ramifications and things. Those kind of things came afterwards. Um, but the Reds, when you look at their team, they had been there before. This is the big red machine. These are no rookies. These are veteran players, all of them. Our team was very young, with the exception of Yaz and Rico and a couple guys. So we're looking at the other side and say, well, these guys, they hadn't won either, and they've been very close. And you could just feel the momentum starting to shift towards their side of the field. But we've won a lot of games coming from behind during that season. And so we just kept plugging along. And, I'm going to jump to the moment, right? 2 on and Bernie pinch hits. And this is the moment of the game. My 3-run homer got us back in, but this is the moment. And I'm on second base watching Bernie swing, and he gets 2 strikes on Relive Eastwood, buries one inside, and he's not going to swing. In the last second, he flicks it, and then it goes about 2 feet foul. I went, oh, God, that's the worst swing I ever saw in my life. And he's like, whoo, because Bernie did not like the ball in. He liked it away. So the next pitch, where is it? It's out over the plate, just where Bernie likes it. And he smokes it to center. I spin around because there's 2 outs. And I'm looking up there, and I'm on second, so I'm going to score no matter what. And I'm watching it, and it's out of here. And that place went crazy. I mean, you thought they were loud in the first inning. Nah, this was the moment of the game. And Bernie hits that home run to dead center. Now we're back in it. Now it's anybody's game. And the fans came back. They're in it now. And now we're like supercharged. So that was an electric moment for sure.
Moment like that in the World Series, and that's what it sort of becomes, this epic game, right? The Dwight Evans play in the 11th inning, right? He doubles up Griffey because nobody thought he was going to get a glove on that. You're over there in center field watching him make that play. Take us through that moment from your eyes.
Yeah, you know what? It's late in the game. It's October baseball. It's cold. The ball does not carry to right field. in those circumstances. April and September, you don't hit it down there. That's Death Valley. Yaz and I said, don't hit it down there. That 380 mark, it's not going to go out. And when Joe hit that ball, now my job is to get over just in case it gets by Dewey, and get to it. My job is to get over and back him up. So I had a really good view of what was happening, and I could see the ball was a hook shot. I mean, it had a top spin. It wasn't going to carry, and I didn't think it had enough to get out. But he hit it hard enough. I'm more of like a line drive type. I didn't know if Dewey could get back there in time. So he goes back, and the ball started to go over his head, and Dewey twists and puts his glove up. And talking to Dewey later, he said he didn't really see it. And it goes in his glove, and I go, woohoo! So he spins around. He had the wherewithal to throw it back to first. Now, that's offline, and Yaz goes to get the ball. But here's the play that everybody forgets about. Rooster is the guy at first, our shortstop. He goes over to cover, and Yaz throws the Rooster for the double play. So this is a great play on many levels. I mean, we got guys everybody's doing the right thing. And it was just like, ooh, look at that play. But in the game, with so many plays, it just kind of gets, I don't know if it gets buried, but there's so many things that happen in one game that it's like, God, what can happen next?
Yeah, there was the whole kind of well-known communique of Pete Rose when he's I forget if it was when he was coming to the plate or when he was on base, saying like, "Can you even believe this that we're part of this game?" Right? Like at that point, as you're feeling the electricity of the crowd, yeah, is it even possible to, you said, as you said earlier, you're kind of in the moment, right? Like you have to win the game, but is there a point where you're able to step outside of that moment to just be like, this is something that is beyond anything I've experienced on a baseball field before?
Again, I have to be honest with you. My personal point of view, no. I'm looking at every pitch, and I'm trying to be focused on what needs to be done at the time. All these things that you're talking about happen post-career for me. I mean, I'm in it. I'm in it to win it, and I'm not seeing those things now. Pete, he's been around. He's like a 10-year veteran. I'm a rookie. Lots of things happened to me that year, tons of them, all first things that ever happened. Well, this is just more first things that ever happened. It just happened to be in Game 6. And I didn't appreciate the magnitude and the magnificence of that single game until many years after my career was over, to be honest. Then you look back and say, dang, that was some kind of game, wasn't it? And then, but at the time, I'm just thinking, okay, we need to win this. How are we going to do this? That's all I'm thinking about. Pete, like I said, he's been around. Their guys have been around. I haven't been around. I've been around for 6 months.
Beyond the game, Fred, beyond the game, right? What made it special for New England is the team's connection with the city, right? Like you were a young team. It's a college town. Alex mentioned earlier, we're sort of right after the busing crisis had happened, and here's Jim, right? This man from the South who sort of captures the New England's imagination. It was a team that here's Louis Tiant, right, with his flamboyance and everything that goes along with Louis. You guys, in so many ways, reflected what Boston and New England was. When did you become aware of that? Like, you're a West Coast guy. You're coming in from USC, right? Couple years in the minors, and here you are in the middle of this. Were you aware of that? Were you aware of how special this team was? That this didn't happen every year. These teams don't always connect with the city the way you guys did.
I think one of the things, the big reasons that we connected with the fans, the fan base, especially the outfield fan base, they're college kids and high school kids, right? Well, we're almost the same age as they are. You got 22, and 23, and our shortstop's 23. So they're going, well, these guys are us. Let's go have a beer. And so that's the outfield, and that we're right next to them. And I really think that's one of the reasons. Of course, you got Yaz and Rico, and they remember from '67. But this is the team that's now, right? And those kids are all in school, and they identified with us. and we're all pretty good. We could play, and they've never seen that before. You might see one or two rookies come up and do well, but not like us. I mean, we were really good, and all four of us playing our positions. We could play defense, we could hit, we could do everything. They'd never seen that. So I think that's really the big reason, one of the big reasons that they identify with that 75 team. We were just so doggone young and key positions. Now, the rest of the guys, Fisk wasn't exactly an old timer. And you got a sprinkling of veterans, but boy, they love that youth. And I think just that's the thing that they let out about, because I used to hear them, in the outfield. They were yelling, and then come sit on the bench with us because there was no seats, right? There's just the bench, and so they were cozy and doing the thing, and it was just a great atmosphere. Believe me when I tell you this, being a Southern California guy, I played a lot of baseball on the West Coast. I never experienced the electricity that I felt going to Fenway. And I love that. I fed off that. Remember, I'm a multi-sport guy, so I'm used to having fans in the stands, and I really appreciated that kind of feeling. Number one, I knew the history of the stadium. I will tell you this briefly. I came up in '74. My first thing, I went out there by myself, and I walked out to center field, and I remembered all the guys that played there. And I'm looking at the grass. I'm saying, man, Joe D was here, Mickey Mantle was here, all the guys, and all the great Red Sox players that were on that field. So I said, wow, this is pretty cool. And then all of a sudden, you fill the stands, and you have the history, and then they have that intensity. There's no better place to play.
I did want to ask. You mentioned, the unique quality of the rookies with that group. This is something that you can't expect, that kind of production from guys from no matter how talented. And obviously, it was actually very funny. If you go back to 1974, you and Jim were both together in Pawtucket, being managed on a team that was managed by Joe Morgan. It was terrible. It was your record as the Globe was writing kind of regular dispatches from Pawtucket, being like, it's kind of a really bad year in Pawtucket, but there are two very good prospects who are roaming the outfield there, and Joe Morgan would always kind of like have these lengthy, like multi-paragraph and kind of discursive responses to Peter Gammons about these two are going to be very special young players. But you're young. Did you have any sense that you were supposed to not succeed? Right? Like, how did you get? What did it take for you guys as rookies to be able to propel a team to the top of the American League?
Yeah, that's a great question. Jimmy, he came up out of high school and went through the system and killed it all along the way, right? But he played on bad teams. He did really well and never experienced, I don't think, the things that I had. My college career, well, to be honest with you, it was second to none. We won three national titles at USC. Plus, I represented the United States and three different teams in two different countries. So I had done a lot of things as an amateur that really people didn't know about. And then when Jimmy and I got called up from AA to AAA, we won the AAA World Series in 74. No, 73. So
Right.
that was the first time that he had been on the team, but I had been. So I kind of knew how it was supposed to go. And to be honest with you, that's what I expected. As a USC athlete in the 70s, we expected to win championships, not just titles, for the league and all those things. We expected to win national titles. That's what we were all about. So I had that. I was not a rah-rah guy, but that's what I expected. So to me, coming to the World Series in 75, well, this is the way it's supposed to be. That's kind of what I don't think I exuded that because I was a pretty quiet guy, but we put Jimmy and I together. I don't think there's ever been a tandem of rookies that's come across that I can remember hitting 3-4 in the lineup and having the impact it did on a team. Jimmy had just great success in the minors, and I did okay, but he just tore it up. And so I think everybody thought he would continue to do that. They didn't know what I was going to do. But you put us together because we played center and left. I mean, it was just a great tandem. I love Jimmy, and we've known each other since Double A. So we go way back. We go way back, and I love the fact that we came up together. That was pretty cool.
You didn't have him in the World Series because of the injury. Would it have been different if you had him?
Oh, you know what? And I told this to Bench, and I told it to Morgan and all those guys. And I said, listen, if we have Jimmy Rice, not only do we win the World Series, I think we win it 6. I don't even think there's a game 7. And they were going, oh, they got their feathers. They were like, no, that would never happen. Really? Really? You know, Jimmy was pretty good our first year. And he hit, sometimes he hit third, sometimes he hit fourth, but he was right in the middle of it all the time. And, we have him. I thought, we win it easily. Then their left-handed pitcher, Gullett, he's not effective. He's just we're going to win. That's all there is to it. We're going to win.
So but getting back to Game 6, there's this incredible drama that's unfolding with this incredible cast of characters, right? Like you look up and down the lineups, and we're talking about multiple Hall of Famers who are in both lineups, right? Like I think half a dozen, I believe, and it should be more, very frankly, who are in the Hall of Fame from those two teams. So you're going through, so you get past the Dewey catch, which is mind blowing and game altering, and that's a kind of, can you believe it? This thing is never going to end, and then it ends, right? Like what you were in that unique vantage point of being able to see Fisk leading off the inning. What was it like from the batter's box? How locked in were you on him versus how much were you thinking, like kind of game planning for your own at bat? What's going through your head both before and after that Fisk swing?
Well, everybody forgets it, and to be honest with you, I have forgotten as well that Darcy had thrown 2 perfect innings prior to. He's a ground ball pitcher, low ball pitcher, right? Well, what they didn't know is that Pudge is a low ball hitter. So we're standing on deck watching Darcy warm up. I'd never seen him before, I'm a rookie. I've never seen anybody before. So I'm watching how the ball's moving in. And Pudge, we're both looking at him. And Pudge says to me, Freddie, I'm going to hit one off the wall. You drive me in. I said, sounds like a great plan to me. And then so, that pitch comes down. And he just cuts it off. I had a great vantage point, just like I had a great vantage point for Carbles at second. Now I'm watching, and I've already scooted towards home plate a little bit. So I knew it had home run distance right away. It was a question whether it would stay fair, right? But he hit it so hard, he didn't have a chance to hook foul. And so, he hits it, and I'm watching, and then gone, boom, and I jump up, I'm going crazy like, well, everybody else, right? All of New England. And then, watching Pudge round the bases, and he couldn't have been happier, but it was just a frozen moment in time. I remember the pitch going down and in, and Pudge just cut it off like he would. That's the kind of hitter he was. He loved it down and in, and he just smoked it. Now, have we been playing at their place, it might have had a chance to hook foul, because 330 to 315 down the line, it maybe hooks foul, but not at our joint. The wall giveth and the wall taketh away.
It's actually funny. Like during that series, there was a Globe feature during the rainouts that was where they had enlisted some computer scientists of the time to say, like, there's no way that Fenway, like, to throw water on the listed dimensions of Fenway Park, and they were like, actually it's 306 down the line, and they have a computer scientist measuring the left field wall. But your point is well taken, right? How does that ball stay fair? Well, it helps when the foul pole is really close.
Yeah, it does, and it requires, if you were to keep that ball fair and say it's 340, that would require a different type of swing. And in those days, we were taught to hit the ball out in front of the plate. So that's what he did. Now, if you're playing in today's game, they pull their hands in a little bit, and that keeps the ball straighter, keeps the ball stays fair better. But in those days, we hit the ball in front of the plate, and that's just what Pudge did. And like I said, Morgan's ball stays in and right, because it's huge in right field, huge in right field. It's just a unique stadium, and we had a couple guys that could take advantage. And Pudge was one of them, and Rico was the other. They could hook the ball there, but you still had to hit it high enough. The wall's 40 feet tall, so if he hits the ball a little lower, it's a single. it's a great place to play, and at that point in time, it was a super place to play.
He comes around third base, and it felt like half the stadium somehow got on the field. Like he's elbowing guys out of the way. Was that all happening on your side too? Like you're coming to home plate to see him. How crazy was that moment?
Well, that was, before the days of walk-off homers and everybody's at the plate throwing water on people. That wasn't done, but we were all there. I'm on deck, so I'm right there. And then, half of our dugouts there as well. And, I was watching Pudge, knock guys out of the way. He looked like a fullback for the Patriots. It's like, get out of my way. I'm trying to get to home plate. Umpire's there to make sure he does his job up on home plate. He goes, bonk, he stomps with both feet. And then, we're all over him and stuff. And it was pandemonium at home plate and in a clubhouse. I don't even remember if we had reporters in there. It was bedlam. It was bedlam. And at some point, after the celebration, we got to go, oh, wait, there's a game 7.
How difficult or easy is it to reset for that, right? The game ends after midnight, right? Like this is a long, epic game that is just concluded. How easy is it to kind of like replenish and be ready after this? This was kind of like the heavyweight fight, right? Like where you guys won in the 15th round. What is it like getting ready for game 7 after that?
Yeah, well, technically it's the same day.
Yeah.
This is a record. 2 World Series games played on the same day. End of game 6 and start of game 7. I don't know how much I slept, to be honest with you, because we went to bed obviously very early in the morning. Good thing it wasn't a day game, but that game 7 got there pretty quickly, and you're just still riding the high, but adrenaline can only take you so far. And then the reality sets in and you have to do your job. And we got off to a good start for sure. But most of the guys, again, this maybe shows that when rookies, we haven't experienced that like their veteran team. So I don't know how well I bounced back in that scenario, to be honest with you. Like their team probably goes, okay, let's dig in and do what that needs to be done. And I don't know what I was thinking. I just thought, well, okay, game 7, let's go out and win it. But there was no prep time. I mean, it just happened so quickly. The transition from 6 to 7, like it was hours away, to be honest.
All right, Fred, you're coming in for the tradition. We're going to talk about all this again at the TD Garden on November 18th. You're bringing Jim Rice along as your presenter, which would be great to have the Gold Dust Twins up there on stage. When you come back to Boston and you're part of all these conversations, what strikes you the most? I mean, Dan Shaughnessy wrote a piece on this the other day, how we're still talking about this damn game 50 years later, like it happened yesterday, right? And does it feel like that? Like, that moment resonated with so many people. What is it like for you to come back here and talk about it with fans?
I actually love it. Like I said, I didn't appreciate what that series did for baseball in New England at the time. I really did not. It was, like I say, many years later, after my career was over, that I was able to look in the rearview mirror and say, you know what? That was really special. Not only game 6, but the series itself. And I remember that baseball was kind of taking a back seat to football at that time. And that series, I think more people watched that series than any series in history, to be honest, because every person in the country was watching it. There was nothing else to watch, and everybody watched that series. And after that, baseball was charged ahead. And it was electric. And to go back to Boston to be able to speak to the people, and I've had the opportunity to talk to fans now and get their perspective, and it's really enlightened me how much our things are playing in that 75 season, especially affected the fans in New England. I didn't appreciate that until I got to speak to them individually and collectively. So I appreciate their feedback. And so for me, to come back to New England, especially like the tradition, I love this stuff. I love being able to communicate and bring back people into time, because time stops. It's like when I'm back with Jimmy, it's like we're 22 years old again. And we could remember things together that we could never remember on our own. And I think that's the way it is with the fans in New England as well.
That's going to be fun having you guys together. Thanks for sharing a little time with us. You must have been 5 years old when that game was played, because there's no way it's been 50 years since. Congratulations. Happy anniversary. And thanks for joining us, Fred. We appreciate it.
Okay, guys. I'll see you in a couple of months.
Can't wait.
See you
Can't wait to see you up here for the tradition.
310 to Left is presented by your New England Ford dealers, who've been taking everyone out to the ball game at Fenway Park for decades. Catch Ford next time you're at Fenway, including in the Ford Clubhouse, a full-service bar perfect for bringing your lineup together and for recording our live edition of 310 to Left. It's all brought to you by your New England Ford dealers and F-Series, America's best-selling trucks for 48 years and the official truck of the Boston Red Sox. That was great. Great conversation with Fred Lynn, the MVP and the Rookie of the Year in that year, 1975. Again, he's going to be part of the tradition. Going to be an amazing lineup at TD Garden. The money benefits the Sports Museum and the great work they've done and continue to do. Boston versus bullies, using athletes to come to schools and talk about the importance of not bullying and educating so many kids. Just an amazing group and an amazing program. And the tradition, you got to be the presenter along with Dennis Eckersley when we honored him a few years back, Alex. So you know how special it is. I just want to let you know, tickets are available. You can contact Rachel Goldberg at the Sports Museum, R. Goldberg at sportsmuseum.org, or just go to thesportsmuseum.org and learn more about sponsorship opportunities. But Alex, I've hosted this for years now. You got to be there that night. You've been around it. It's just such a cool event because there's so many different athletes mingling and sharing stories. It's special every year.
Yeah, you have this format of the longer form conversations, and they really are conversations among people who know each other well, care about each other, and are able to kind of draw out these wonderful life stories from one another in a way that is kind of so unvarnished and unguarded and approachable, and you really feel like you're in conversation with these athletes who you may or may not know personally, but you feel like you do at the end of it. And it's a pretty exceptional event, and one where you got to see the way that Fred lights up. That's with us. Wait until he's talking about this with Jim. It's going to be unbelievable.
And it is incredible to dig back into that game. We spent a half hour essentially talking about one game. And, you and I could probably do that with a lot of games because of what we do, but fans can do this. Like, you hunker down with someone of my age at a bar and ask him what he remembers about Game 6 of the 1975 World Series, you're probably going to get a half hour out of him or her, if not longer, because that was a series in a game. Right? I mean, there were just as you said, so many twists and turns and incredible moments where they look like they were down and the Carbo pinch hit home run ties it up. And then the Evans play keeps it going and on and on and on. Just there have been very few moments like that in baseball, maybe in sports history.
I was going to say, how many sports history moments were kind of among maybe the most memorable moments from an Oscar-winning screenplay, right? Like, you think about the conversation about Game 6 and Good Will Hunting. That's such a touchstone, both because of how vividly the characters are able to evoke it, and then also digest it, but also make it about life. That was what it was. It was a game that was it was a life moment for a lot of the people who were observing that game. At a certain point, it transcends just sporting event and becomes a milestone in across lives of both people participating, people watching, people who didn't watch, and that is this game 50 years later. That it for people who, you know, for certainly for those who did experience it. And again, I'm not one of them. I have only kind of I've put in my time studying it to appreciate it, as you know, and grew up watching the game of the week with Carlton Fisk slow-mo hopping down the line, which itself was a wonderful accident of television history. That camera shot was never supposed to happen, but ended up being this kind of like iconic one. Anyway, it's, you know, for anyone who experienced it, yeah, there's a reason why the details remain so vivid, and, you know, regardless of how far removed you are from the game itself.
You know, and we touched on it briefly before, but baseball would change very quickly afterwards, right? Free agency came into play. Players began to move. Fred Lynn was one of them. Fred Lynn leaves Boston, and he said it before, you know, if he'd have spent his whole career in Boston, who knows? He might have been a Hall of Famer. Certainly they may have had, you know, 78 might have been a whole different situation, right? You add Fred Lynn into some of those teams over the next 5-10 years. What does that do to the history of the Red Sox? And that's, I think, as we look back on it, in a lot of ways, that 75 World Series almost grew in importance because it was the end of an era. It was the end of, you know, the dynasties, if you will, the big red machines, those type of teams that were built and stayed together for decades. Didn't happen anymore because free agency changed it.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating thing. Like the 1970s were a bizarro period of baseball history in which you did have dynastic teams, like all stacked one after the other, right? You had the Orioles reaching the World Series 69 to 71, only won one of them, but they were a wagon. Then followed by the A's that won 3 straight World Series, followed by the Big Red Machine winning 2 straight, followed by the Yankees winning back-to-back in 77 and 78, and then no other teams winning back-to-back until 1996 to 2000 with the Yankees, and then none since, pending what happens with the Dodgers this year. So it was the end of dynasties. Keep that in mind for the competitive balance conversations and free agency. Yeah, it was a, you know, that's why Peter Gammons' book, Beyond the Sixth Game, that recognized both how extraordinary this game was and the fact that it was at the end of a certain way of the game having done business for its first century, was pretty remarkable. And it was a crossroads moment where the game reached this like kind of incredible zenith of popularity because of what this game became, what that World Series became. And remember, that Game 7 was also great. That was one where the Reds scored the game-winning run in the top of the 9th inning on the road at Fenway Park, and you know, not with like a bullet off the wall or a home run, but instead just kind of this, you know, there is something that's metaphorically powerful about Joe Morgan kind of flipping a ball into left center in order to drive in the winning run, and it was. Yeah, it was a transitional moment that both showed the power and the reach of television, and how much money could flow into the game because of the interest in sports, but that also sat at this fault line where the structure of professional sports in the world was about to shift drastically.
Bill Lee threw the eephus pitch. See, you're getting the 11-year-old Tom Caron awake now. I don't want to. I'm going to start reliving all the emotions of that game. It was hard. That was, you know, when I remember as a kid, like that was a World Series loss, Game 7 loss. I probably was in a bad mood for 3 weeks after that, and I wasn't alone. You know, like you would 2 weeks later find yourself waking up in the middle of the night thinking about moments from that World Series that could have changed the outcome of that, and how angry we were as Red Sox fans. And, you know, the curse of the Bambino hadn't been coined yet, right? Like we just knew it had been a very long time. But, man, that one stuck with a lot of people, and it was only over a matter of time, I think, that we started to look back on the glory of Game 6 as sort of the touch point and the memory of that World Series rather than ultimately the outcome of Game 7. Obviously, winning a World Series in 2004 kind of gives you a little more grace to look back at 86 and 75 and 67 and the moments that led to that. But at first, you know, it was all about that. You know, he threw the eephus pitch. They lost in the 9th inning. They lost in Game 7. And you know, then ultimately you start to realize, man, that Game 6, whatever happened, I'm really glad I was a Red Sox fan in 1975 and I got to see that.
Yeah, that's really interesting to me because like I don't know I don't have personal experience of the fallout. Like I was under the impression that 78 was the real gut punch one, the one that caused
Well,
Stephen King to cancel classes, right? In when he was teaching his creative writing class and say like, nope, can't do it today after the Bucky F Dent game, right?
yeah.
But it was 75. I was kind of under the impression, and evidently this was misguided, that there was a sense that it had been a transcendent like sports experience that almost like wiped out, like not wiped out, but downplayed the relevance of who won versus who lost.
Yeah, I think that took time. The greats like Peter Gammon saw it right
Yeah.
away, but I was just an 11-year-old angry Red Sox fan, and I wasn't alone, right? I mean, because that would have been, it would have been such an upset, right? And I just remember watching the end of that game. It was much like watching the end of Game 7 in 1986, right? And again, we go back to Game 6 in the Buckner game, not in a good way for Red Sox fans, but when that series first ended, you weren't thinking about what an epic Game 6 that was. You were thinking about, damn, they lost Game 7. And so it didn't take forever, and certainly I feel like over a couple of months you start to look back on the thing as a whole, and then came 78. But we're not going there. We do want you to go though to the tradition. It is November 18th at TD Garden. The money benefits the Sports Museum. If you've ever been before, it is a great night, and it promises to be an amazing night this time around with Fred Lynn, Jim Rice coming as presenter. I've heard some of the names of the presenters. I'm not at liberty to give them away yet, but Vince Wilfork and Tim Thomas and Isaiah Thomas, and we mentioned that Keegan Bradley and Gabby Thomas are both coming in as well. Just dawned on me that half the field are Thomases. That's got to be a first, but we'll work that into the script, no doubt about that. But this was good stuff,
Oh,
Alex.
doubting Thomas, no doubt about that. The Thomases, yeah, there you go. Yeah.
And I'm Thomas, so I get to host it.
Yes, there you go.
All right, fun trip down memory lane. Happy 50th anniversary to all celebrate Game 6 of the 1970.